seems to have been uncertain of how to proceed at this point. The concept which was dominant with him was that of economic alienation. In the manuscript of 1844, Marx's powerful concentration upon economics produced a great new insight which swept him back into the orbit of Hegel. In the manuscript entitled Criticism of the Hegelian Dialectic and Philosophy as a Whole, there appears the insight on Marx's part that Hegel's phenomenology of spirit was in its underlying meaning a philosophy of economic life and economic interpretation of history, where Hegel talks about the externalization of spirit, of the absolute, estranged from itself, alienating itself in human consciousness. He was really speaking in a confused way, not of spirit's self-externalization and self-alienation in human consciousness, but really of man externalizing himself in material objects, of man's self-alienation in the objects which he produces. The underlying hidden meaning of the Hegelian philosophy, Marx discovers, is economic. Hegel, turned upside down, provides a study of man's alienation from the products of his own labor in the money economy of capitalism. And did not Hegel, in the famous chapter on master and slave in the Phenomenology of Spirit, show that the slave's production of the object appears to him to be an external and alien object, but that the slave overcomes the externalization and alienation of the products of his labor, and he recognizes his own essence in the objects he has made, discovers his freedom in his objectification of himself. The slave reappropriates himself from what had been the externalized, alienated products of his labor. Moreover, now that Marx has the key to the real underlying meaning and truth of Hegelian philosophy, Marx takes Hegel's phenomenology of spirit as the model for his own construction of an account of the self-realization of economic man, of labor. The true meaning of history is the developmental process in which man, generic man, laborer, producer, creator of material and non-material objects, achieves self-realization and repossesses his own essence from the objects he has produced. And Marx, however, criticizes Hegel for his idealism, which sees the essence of man as spirit and sees alienation only as the alienation of consciousness or of spirit. But mankind, says Marx, is a natural being, not merely spirit, and mankind develops in the course of world history. He has powers, this man, faculties, desires, creative abilities, which have their outcome in production. Man is a creative being. Mankind in its history, says Marx, has transformed the objects of the entire material world, and he has created the entire world of culture. The vast historical and natural accumulation of the material and cultural objects that mankind has produced are the externalizations, the embodiments of man's creative powers. Man actualizes himself in the world. In Marx's own powerful language, the whole so-called world history is nothing other than the production of man himself through human labor. It is Marx's view, which he will never give up, that the history of human beings is a developing process in which they have created the entire world of objects of nature and of human culture. And in this developing process, human beings will come to realize their own true nature. But the human species does not realize that it is the creator of the world of natural objects and of the totality of culture. For example, the whole of modern industry is man's product. Machines and factories are the externalizations of human hands, ears, eyes, brains. But what man sees when he looks at the objects he has produced are alien things in an alien, hostile world, standing out there over against him. This is so because man's productive activity is done in servitude to the god money rather than in spontaneous self-activity and self-determination. Human alienation takes three main forms, according to Marx, in the 1844 Paris manuscript. First, man is alienated from the product of his work. Second, from the act of producing. And third, from his own social nature. First, the worker in industrial capitalism is alienated from his product, which exists external to him, is utilized by strangers as their private property. And the more he produces of them, the less is his productivity valued. He becomes cheaper than the cheap commodities he produces, and his work and his wages for his work are just sufficient to what is necessary to keep him working. Secondly, the capitalist system alienates man from his productive activity. His activity is not determined by his personal benefit or by his own creativity, but is something which he is compelled to do in order to remain alive. As a result, says Marx, the worker only feels himself outside his work, and in his work he feels outside himself. His labor is forced labor. The more he works, the less human he becomes. He finally feels at home only in the animalian functions of eating, drinking, and sexuality. And thirdly, capitalist society alienates the worker from his fellow man. Unlike animals, says Marx, who produce food only for their own immediate needs, humans produce cultural products, such as art and science, for the whole human race. Humans produce as universal beings. But the capitalist system reduces man's productivity to animal labor, to a mere means to satisfy his immediate physical needs. But the worker, too, is in bondage to greed, is a slave before the master money, the money god of capitalism. Capitalists advise him to save his money and invest it. As Marx says in the Paris manuscripts, this is the advice they get. The less you eat, drink, and read books, the less you go to the theater, the dance hall, the public house, the less you think, love, theorize, sing, paint, the more you save, the greater becomes your treasure, which neither moth nor dust will devour, your capital. The less you are, the more you have.